So welcome everybody. I tend to go through this talk with a lot of students, a lot of colleges and a lot of kids because I had a pretty odd experience coming out of school. I'm a hell of a lot older than you lot and times were a little bit different, but I'll talk to you about those. So I'm going to focus on a little bit about Sega, a little bit about my journey and a little bit about the opportunities that there are within the games industry. So Sega, my role at Sega is I am the Global Digital Distribution Director, and that's a long sort of way to say I am in charge of whatever happens on the internet with our product in terms of how we get them to you guys. So that's dealing with Steam, that's dealing with Amazon, that's dealing with whoever. For our PC content, I also look after some of the console stuff for Europe. But just to give you an idea of what that scope is, I work for a company that is based in Japan, and we manage Japan from here in the UK. And we do that not because of any weirdness, it's just because we're really successful at what we're doing. So 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. Everything was siloed, and the team that I've built around me, we are managing to be so successful with what we're doing that Sega has basically said, you guys look after the whole world. So when I give you an idea of where I started and where I come out of school from, it will give you an idea of the opportunities that are afforded to you as well. So who are Sega? A lot of people think Sega is a Japanese company. Well, they are, but they originally were an American organization, and that was formed by two chaps in Hawaii who were trying to think of ways they can make money out of all the US forces hanging around Hawaii at the end of World War II. So there's thousands and thousands of troops, and they're all a bit bored, so what can we get them to do? And they made physical arcade machines. These are things based on ball bearings, clockworks, now really sort of pachinko machines over in Japan, so pinball machines, that sort of thing. In 1951, the company moved to Tokyo because that's where there were a lot of US troops, so it was a really good way of finding your market. And then in the early 80s, so right at the start of the sort of console era, they were bought by a Japanese company. So Sega only became a real Japanese business in the mid-80s. So released a series of video games consoles, which hopefully some of you will have heard your parents talking about them. Makes me feel very old. And in 2003, we decided to stop creating hardware because it was so expensive and it was really tough. So we just went into create games for various people, and that's why Sonic moved from a Sega-only thing onto various platforms. 2004, we became one of Japan's biggest companies with a merger with the Sami Corporation, and Sega is an absolutely enormous corporation. A lot of people look at the way the video games business has gone, and they'll look at Sega and they'll go on comments and forums and stuff and say, oh yeah, Sega, we're all that, and you know, they don't really do a great deal anymore. But we don't tend to talk about ourselves too much. Obviously, we have Sonic the Hedgehog. Everybody knows Sonic the Hedgehog. You know, he's effectively one of our main brands. We deal with Sonic as an entertainment entity, as a merchandise, as a video game. We have to figure all this stuff out. So we work with Sonic. We also have the console history. So we've got 1,016 games in our library, and we have to go and figure out what we're going to do with all those, because some people want to play them again, and they're on Mega Drive or Master System or Game Gear or Dreamcast, and we have to figure out how is it best to bring those to the wider world. We then have our developers that we partner up with, and these are the things that people don't tend to know too much about. They don't really tend to think, oh yes, that's Sega, and Creative Assembly is one of those, where we make the Total War series of games, highly accurate historical simulations, which are hugely successful. We then have a bunch of Japanese content that we work with. Valkyria Chronicles is one of mine and my team's that it came out on PS4, and Sega of Japan didn't really know what to do with it, and we convinced them to bring it out on PC. And when they said to us, okay, let's try and get it to PC as quickly as possible, let's spend a little bit of money on it and let's do that, we said no. Let's do as best as we possibly can, because PC gamers deserve it. We want to have the best experience, because we have really started to realize as an industry that best practice good games work, right? In the old days of spending a lot of marketing and sort of seeing what you could do wasn't tending to be successful, because you know, a whole bunch of consumers start talking and conversing with one another, and you get their own viewpoint is probably as more important as the marketing or the PR. And that's not to say anybody goes out to try and make a bad game. Everybody wants to go out and make a good game, just things sometimes don't fall into place. and you're left with something that you have to work with. Okay, Football Manager 16, another massive game for us, and one of the, well, if not the world's prime football product, totally engrossed in the football life. Unlike a certain action game, we have our stats within Football Manager used by football clubs around the world. Managers often scout players based on their Football Manager data, and that's not something we're making up, right? So we've invested in an enormous army of scouts throughout the world who'll go in and scout footballers because we want to make the best simulation of football management. Football Manager isn't really a game, it is a simulation of Football Manager life. Again, many people think that's a Sega entity, but Sports Interactive, based in Old Street in North London, we own them and we work very closely with them. We then got Creative Assembly as well. So moving aside from Rome 2, which I mentioned earlier, we've got big brands that we work with, and we've recently tied up a deal with Games Workshop over in Nottingham to bring a fantasy spin to Total War, which we're really excited about bringing out. So that's Sega. On to me. My programming skills, although the font's not in this computer, that's why that's gone a bit funny, of course. My programming skill amounts to that on a ZX Spectrum. That's probably the most successful output of making games I've ever done, okay, just to give you an idea. This is a quote from someone very important to me who said, James, you will never get anywhere playing video games, and that was my mother in 1986. This is me a little bit earlier, probably about 1984. You can see there's a blackboard, not an interactive whiteboard. It sort of puts me in the Victorian era. I went to my careers advisors at sort of 14, and they said, well, your dad's a hairdresser, so you should become a hairdresser. But I don't really want to become a hairdresser. I want to do other things. I quite like games. I said, well, games is a little bit like science, so why don't you go and do something to do with science? You can learn some science stuff, and then you can go and test orange juice in the local orange juice factory. Well, I went and did that for a bit of let's say work experience, and ended up smelling of orange juice and really looking into the secrets, and I've never drunk orange juice ever again. But still, I didn't want to do that. And they then said, well, you can go and work in a supermarket because that's what your grades are going to bring out. And I thought, well, okay, that's not very inspirational. And I left school fairly average, I would say academically, and I went off into sixth form and then into college, and I had no real idea what I wanted to do. I played a lot of video games, okay? But what I wanted to do from a careers point of view is I wanted to go and photograph whale flukes. I wanted to be a photographer, I wanted to go to the Arctic, and I wanted to identify whales by their flukes. And some of you may know that a whale's fluke is a bit like a fingerprint. They're all unique. This is brilliant. I love nature. Let's go and do that. Greenpeace said, yeah, you're the brilliant man for the job. Now give us £30,000. It's like, hang on a minute, aren't you supposed to pay me? But that's obviously my dream job was never going to happen. The other thing I wanted to be was a professional ice hockey player. Not going to happen in this country, so that had to go out the window. And then I got a job in a games shop. And I got a job in a games shop because I walked in one day, asked them if they had any places, and they said, well, we've got a Saturday job, why don't you come into that? And I got into the shop, and I started dusting the shelves, and then I realised that my passionate enthusiasm for games connected with the customers. And after a while, I started to have an idea of different people coming into the shop. It was like that point in The Matrix when you see the guy looking at all the screens and he can read it, but it's gobbledygook to everybody else. So the people within the business at the time obviously didn't have a great deal of knowledge about games, but I was there and I could talk to someone pretty quickly and get an idea of what they would like. And that got trust up, so we got more and more successful. And then from there they said, well, why don't you start buying the games for the shop, deciding what the shop sells? Did that, and then they're like, right, can you start buying for the company and start deciding what the company should do when it comes to new releases? And most of the time I got it right. Sometimes I got it wrong. Investing in many copies of Hagar the Horrible didn't work, and it's a game that's since gone off into the mists of time, but there were many, many successes. Now I worked then from up that ladder. So from that game shop where, I can still smell polish from dusting the shelves in 1991 through to 1995. I can still remember that, working the tills, and this was fortunately just before Sunday trading, but it was hard work, right? Working in a shop is very hard work. So from there, I worked with a couple of importers, buying and selling games throughout Europe. We'd buy lots of copies of Tomb Raider cheap from Turkey and sell them over here, and we'd put them in magazines and we'd sell absolutely bucket loads of them. And then I got approached by a number of companies to start providing them with the sort of information and intelligence on what games they should buy. And then I ended up working for Amazon. And by 2006, I was in Seattle running Amazon's video games business. So that was a pretty awesome place to be. I learned a whole bunch of stuff from Amazon and how you can communicate and sell effectively to people online. From there, I then joined Sega, and I joined Sega working with Football Manager at first to get into the role that I'm in now. So what I'm going to do is very briefly talk to you about the game, and there may well be some video. If it doesn't work, I do apologise. Again, we've just copied it over here. So this is a standard screenshot, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff that goes on. You've got game code, fairly obvious. It's the engine of what's going to run the game, animation, how everything looks, artwork, with the game, the style of the city there. The user interface, very important, how your player is going to engage with your game, how they're going to get the information without it being so cluttered. It's the sort of stuff that it just happens naturally when you're playing really good games. Then there's audio, got to be super immersive, have brilliant music, have really good sound effects, things that bring you into the game. And also there's just the design of the game, story elements, how that works. Now, all of those tasks then need further work. So if we just look at animation, there needs to be MOCAP studio. These are technicians who will stick the golf balls on the lycra suit, and someone has to go and pretend to be a camel or pretend to be a football manager or do stuff like that. And you need people with effective, good drama skills. In the old days, it used to be the programmers themselves would stick themselves and film themselves trying to do movements. But nowadays, we want absolute realism because the technology is moving so quickly that if someone is just acting, it just looks bad, right? So you need someone with those skills. You need to then look at the skeletons to make sure that you don't have that weird effect of, a rag doll that you see in really old movies where there's an actor and then he suddenly falls out of a window and you can obviously see it's a rag doll falling down onto the floor. You have to make sure things look right. But all these things, all these elements have more things that need doing, and that's more people. If you take Grand Theft Auto 5 as an example, there is a team there. I was talking to the devs of GTA, and there's a team there whose job it was for a long time just to figure out how the leaves look. So next time you play GTA and you're stood there calmly, because you don't play it in a bad way, obviously, you just go and look at the scenery and listen to the music. But if you're sat at the traffic lights in your car, just idling along, listening to some cool tunes, and you see a leaf float by, that's probably taken someone a long, long time to put that in. And that was the most passionate thing he's done, was make that leaf. And that's not belittled it. The reason the game is so immersive is because of stuff like that. So there's a whole raft of roles within games development. This is games development that can be done. So if you can do really, high level advanced maths, physics, programming, brilliant. You can just drop onto these things. A lot of the other tasks will need other opportunities, but I'm going to talk to you about those other things. So let's see if we can run some video. There we go. So here you can see just a little bit of an animation from Rome 2 with some Roman soldiers charging into some Carthaginians there. And that's just showing you a little bit of the game. It's all done within Game Engine. But then if we look at the same detail without the graphics on top, you can then see all the elements that there are. So there's projectiles, there are how things are working with scenery elements. How is the AI going to make sure the troops route in the right way? All of this stuff is running under the engine, and it's the stuff you guys will be learning about and, being able to work on. So just to give you an idea of, that's moved off. Oh, little bit loud, sorry about that. This is an example of the MOCAP, of how the animation works. Again, it's probably stuff some of you are having access with. And it's a really, really great tool. Sega has got the largest MOCAP studio in Europe. over in Horsham, which we use for Total War. And we'll stick golf balls and Lycra on anything, but we can't put it on elephants, so we have to still animate elephants. I don't know if there is the possibility of turning the volume down, because there is going to be in a minute, which may be a little bit loud, so apologies about that. If it annoys people, I will fast forward it. But the technology is so state-of-the-art, it allows you to do things in real time, and this is the stuff which, cover your ears, because if the sound is not calmed down a bit, it may. You don't want to hear this again. So you probably didn't want to hear Gangnam Style again, but this is just an example of how our actors in real time can get stuff animated. And this is an animation years ago which have taken a long time to do, right? And this is just the studio having a bit of fun, but it gives you that idea that what the technology allows you to do is animate in real time and allows you to do stuff. So on to the sort of in-depth stuff about, look, if you can't program and you're a bit lost, what else is there left for you to do? You're super passionate about games. So there's a whole range of things that you can do. There are the game idea, how that transpires. People need to decide if the game is a good idea. That goes up to senior managers. You have business planners who will go and research a whole bunch of data. There's so much data now on the internet that you can reach out to about your games that you need to get hold of. It's all very well having that data. You need intelligent decision making based on it. So you need someone to say this stuff does this. Then you have finance teams who have to figure out how everybody gets paid, making sure that all the money within the company is being put in the right places. We have salespeople who will go out and effectively talk to your partners to make sure they're covering your game and supporting it. PR, who work with community, who work with press to make sure that everything you want to talk about is done in the right manner and also on brand, so the right messages go out. You then have your purchasing teams who have to buy all the stuff to go in the boxes, admin staff to make sure the office works efficiently, everybody's happy, that the desks are safe and everything works well. You then have your security teams, not just on site, but also within code to make sure you're not getting hacked all the time. Customer services to make sure all your consumers are happy. That's really important, is to have a really good customer service team. And all these people need training and skills specifically for that, but it gets them into the games industry and you can do a whole bunch with it. Legal, to make sure that your contracts work between two different companies. If we're asking somebody to go and make some code for us, we have to have those parameters laid out. That will need legal framework. Human resources, to make sure everybody within the building is trained, everybody's being looked after well, to make sure the managers are working effectively. We have the creative teams who go out and figure out the artwork, logos, pack shots, all that sort of stuff. We then have community. That's so important, how to engage with people on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. You name it, there's a new one every 5 minutes. But it is all about how you engage with people. And that's becoming so important. IT, to make sure the infrastructure is right, that your email system works with Japan, that the United States servers talk to your servers so you can get game code across very efficiently and all work from remote areas. Marketing, you need people to come up with the $1 million programs of whether you're going to sell and advertise on the cinema or on TV or on Facebook or various different methods of marketing. So you need people there. Testing, it's one of the key ways to get into the games industry. No matter how qualified you think you are, if you can't get a job because there are no code openings, testing it is an awesome way of getting in. The sound of playing a game for money sounds brilliant, but it is very hard work because you're playing the same game monotonously trying to break it. But however, to give you an idea of every single job opening within Sega, that job opening goes to our QA team first, and we employ a lot of people from our QA department because they're super passionate gamers. And if you've got any passion about games and getting into the games industry, like myself, you go in at the bottom. I went in polishing shelves. A lot of the people around me, even though they have really good university degrees, go in at testers levels to get into the industry. Store buyers, that's the sort of thing I did. Store staff, press. You may well think press is hard to get into, but the way press recruit these days is on blogs, vlogs, YouTube videos, Twitter accounts. I know a very big UK-based press organisation who employ people based on their Twitter interactions. And that gives you an idea that, you know, your social network profile is very important for you to go and talk to people in the right way. So engage with companies, engage with press, talk to them, but talk to them positively, because if you decide to troll someone at some point, then 3 years along the line, that'll appear somewhere. Yeah, there we go. So web teams designing all the stuff. Other than that, if you don't want to go down that big route of going to a publisher, you can do it yourself. So we've got Daisy, Stanley Parable, Counter-Strike. These are all teams who went off and made games for themselves and have been able to be super successful by that. Then you can also do your own thing. New Star Games, a friend of mine who created New Star Soccer, he was working at Sotheby's, the auction house, making a PC game in his spare time. He then decided, after a little bit of advice, to go and create an iOS tablet version, an iPhone version, and he has not looked back since, because he's found the right thing. The bottom, you've got the Yogscast. Those guys super passionate about games, really good friends as well, and they have got to where they're going by being passionate and working hard. Some people find them funny, some people don't. That's fine, that's up to them. But they've created a business by talking about video games on YouTube, which even 5 years ago, if you'd went to major marketing people within the video games industry, they'd have laughed you out the room and thought, no one's going to watch games on YouTube. It's all about playing them. But we now know how much of a massive industry it is. So, passion, desire, and work for the bottom. No one is going to hold you back other than yourselves. You are the ones who have the opportunity, you have the belief, you have the desire. The way you won't succeed is only you holding yourself back. So never give up those things. No matter how many times you get pushed back, never give up. Yes, you have to find ways to finance your lifestyle and family and whatever else you've got, and you have to do those. But in the spare time, if you still, you know, go together and get a group of friends to go and talk about games or go and create a game, just do it. You know, because your portfolio, that stuff you do around the outside, is great. Because we're seeing so many candidates with awesome qualifications. It's the ones who've gone out there, got together with some friends, got together with someone in a design course or a music course or a costume design course, and used those talents to help them make their game. Those are the guys who really stand out. The guys and girls who stand out from that CV are the ones going off to do their stuff. And you know, you end up making a mark. So these are the things I've managed to do. So this is a guy polishing shelves, Typing the Dead, concept, design, delivery. We helped in that, we pushed for that, we got the sign off for that. And then if we can see the TF2 characters to go in Sonic Transform, that was, you know, our idea, my idea, something we pushed forward with. And then adding the Yogscast characters in SART for charity, where we raised a whole bunch of cash for charity by putting the character in. Again, that's all been driven by us. So even someone like myself, who was pretty lost coming out of college, got a job at the bottom. It's been a long road, but I've managed to get there. And I think that is it for time. There we go.